guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacinho Tweets and at She Knows Arsenal. Welcome to another show. We're going to be going through all the meat and potatoes of the game against Southampton and some things that have the fallout after the game as well. There wasn't tons of fallout, but there have been some conversations on the exterior of the game based on the result and stuff that we want to talk about as well. And so we'll get into all of that. I want to let you guys know that, of course, I love being on here, but sometimes I need a break. Sometimes I just need a break. Sometimes being on social media is not easy, it's difficult. And so, sometimes I'm just like, instead of going on there and having low energy and not having the right attitude, I just prefer not to come on. And that's just, how I do things. So I'm sorry I haven't been here as much as I should, but I'm here nonetheless. So make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, where I want to kind of begin is just we'll start off with kind of the reaction to the game and then we'll talk about what happened in the actual game. The reaction to the game is not anything that I'm surprised by, because I think there's been an undercurrent of feeling that we haven't been playing as well as we did against Liverpool, against Tottenham, against Leicester, those games. And going into October, we know that this run of fixtures was going to be really difficult, and there's a lot of games in a short period of time. And so we want to kind of see how the team is dealing with it and how Arteta is dealing with it. And I feel like against Bodo Glimt, against Leeds, in some ways against PSV, and of course against Southampton, we have not been at our scintillating best. And that doesn't mean I think the team is horrible or I don't think we'll make our targets. It just means that I don't think our performances have been the same. And I feel like a lot of people feel that way, but they don't feel like it's okay to say. And that's strange to me, because it's obvious that our performances have been the same. You can show me every graph, every statistic, everything you want to show me. When you use your eye test and you just use common sense, Arsenal have not been as good in the last 3 or 4 matches as they've been for the entire season. And it's just not that difficult. It's not that hard. It just is what it is. And so what I prefer to do is, instead of trying to act like saying those types of things are some taboo thing, or you're negative and you're Leanne Gunner, instead of doing that, let's talk about why. Let's talk about how Arteta should fix it. Let's talk about how we truly feel, instead of just acting like it's not happening because we don't want rivals to hear. I don't know what it is, because the reality is when you use your eyes, use your retina, we have not been the same. It doesn't mean that we're crap either. And I've just found it really difficult on social media over the last couple of weeks, because I do feel like when you say things that are outside of the group consensus, sometimes people don't like that. And that's fine. But why can't we talk about it? Why can't we talk about it? And I think at the core, if we get past the idea that anything that isn't innately positive is completely negative, we can have better conversations around Arsenal that are more in depth than just shut up, you're being negative. Do you know what I mean? So that's really where I'm at. And that's part of the reason why I haven't been on here, is because I'm just do I even want to deal with this? Why can't we have just regular conversations and not act like things aren't happening that are actually happening? But if you disagree with me and you think that we've been exactly the same for every single game, none of the performances have dipped, we're just the same old team, fair enough. I accept that. I accept that. But I don't think that's how people actually feel, because the way that people have reacted to this draw and how they've gone back to the performances against Bodo Glimt and Leeds, and some people even to PSV, tells me that people actually felt like those performances weren't as good, like I said as well. So let's talk about it. Tawanda says, it's the first time this young team has multiple fixtures in a month. I agree. I agree with that. And I think that we have to be honest that this team really hasn't had that challenge. And so again, when you express something and say we haven't been as good, that doesn't mean that I don't think the team will respond well or that this is how we're going to be all the time. But I like that you've gone to Wanda a better place of conversation around why is this happening? Not is it happening? Because it is. This young team is going to have to learn how to play games every 3 days. They didn't do that last season. They just didn't, really, and in the 1 month that we did in January, we didn't handle it very well. So I think Arteta and this team are learning that they have to have the same level of performance every single game, and it's difficult, it's hard to do, especially because we played quite a few away games in this run after such an emotional, difficult week against playing against Tottenham and Liverpool. So I can accept that, that the team is still trying to get up to speed with that. And one of the things that I liked what Arteta was saying was that kind of like the reason why he plays some of our better players in every single game is because they need to learn how to play 70 games a season. They need to know how to play 70 games a season. And I know that that's not what we should be doing. You're going to run them into the ground, but it's the truth. When you get into the Champions League, your best players play every single game. And so I do think that they're not struggling per se, but we are seeing a little bit of a dip in form. A little bit of a dip in the performances. We're not as clinical. We're a little bit more sloppy. We're falling off in the second half. We're looking leggy, and I think those things really come into play when you're playing so many games in 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 a small amount of time and you haven't really done it before. Hightower says, to be honest, Jess, what I'm hoping for this season is that we turn more draws in win and loss. Wait, I'm hoping this season is that we turn more draws in win and loss to draws, and that's what we're seeing. I agree with you, Hightower. I do think that last season against Southampton, this the same kind of thing happened. We lost. We didn't win the game. We just lost. And we do have this tendency under Mikel Arteta to either win games or lose games. And so we went into 2 games not playing as well as we possibly could. We were definitely back against the wall against Leeds. We got the win, and then against Southampton was a poor performance in the second half in particular, and we still came away with a draw. I do think that that shows that we're getting better for sure, but these performances kind of need to get back up to speed at some point as well because we don't want those draws to become losses. Um, High Tech J says, in the last 2 matches, we played very well, but we can't score. So for me, and you guys can let me know how you feel about this, not being clinical in a match is a part of a performance. And so when you see that we're creating tons of chances, but we're missing sitters and we're not putting the ball in the back of the net, I think that you can attribute that to the performance. And so for me, in one game, if we create a lot of chances and we don't score the goal, I say that we're unlucky. If it happens in 2 or 3 games on the bounce, then I'm starting to think that that's something and something that we should talk about. I personally think it's fatigue and a little bit of complacency and maybe a lack of confidence from our number 9, but we have played well, especially in the first half in most of the games that we played. It's just we're lacking a little bit of that clinical edge, and so we have to figure out how to find that again. Um, Blaze says, Jess, it's not just fatigue. Players aren't clinical and ruthless in the last 3 games. I agree. I think it can be a multitude of things that are happening. But again, I'd rather have those conversations than like the diluted ones. Um, Nathaniel says the ref caused the game for us. We can talk about that as well. Sports says part of it is depth in the squad. So basically, we've got the ref, no depth, not being clinical, fatigue, and complacency. You know, it's a lot of different reasons why, and I think it could be a mixture of all of those things. High Tech J says, in my opinion, Jesus could have scored 5 total goals versus PSV and Southampton. He is going through a rough patch, and I feel like we have gotten the exact Gabriel Jesus that we paid for. This is the guy that exactly like when you read the label, this is exactly what you got, and he has technical ability out. He's such a good technical player. He's physically good, he's strong, he's fast. But he consistently underperforms his XG and misses sitters and misses easy chances. And so I think it's a confidence thing. I think that maybe he's too in his head. I do think in the last couple of games we've seen him come too deep, and try to do too much. and he's better when he's more finishing off moves and staying into the final third. But we have to, for me personally, I do think that I would love to see the fan base be more forgiving towards players that are in poor form and treat them the way that they treated Saliba when he headed the ball into the back of our own net. I know that Saliba is younger and we're afraid he's not going to sign, and we love him so much, so we don't want to criticize him, and that's fine. But uh, uh, I don't see the same loyalty towards other players that I see like towards Saliba or Saka. And I think Gabriel Jesus in this time where he's also recognized, because he also says that he knows that his goals have dried up, that as a fan base, we get behind him so that he can get that goal as quickly as possible. And he doesn't become Lacazette. And so players do go through difficult moments. They go into bad form, good form. That's how most players are. And I do think that we tend to turn our back on players that go into bad form a little bit too quickly. But some of it also is that there's some people that just didn't want him in the beginning. And so this is confirmation bias from them. He still has performed really well for us. I think if he had not been the player that he is at the beginning of the season, we would not be where we are. And so not that we owe it to him, but I just would like to see a little bit more backing to Gabriel Jesus. Like, we know you're going to score the goals. We know you're going to get back into form, rather than we need a new striker. That's just not how I would handle it. But I get that some people are really frustrated. Don One says, look, we didn't lose to Tottenham, lose like Tottenham. Hopefully Arteta will play the under 21s against PSV. Zach 10 is asking a question. Having said all that, will we see the benefit of resting our first 11 for Zurich game against Chelsea, which occurs a few days later? Potentially. I think he won't rest players against PSV. I think we'll see a strong lineup, and then maybe we'll rotate against Nottingham Forest. I don't know. Because if we beat PSV, right, don't we come top of the group or something like that? So nailing down the top of the group, I think, is the most important thing for Arteta right now. So I can see a really strong lineup going to the Netherlands and starting in that game. And then against Nottingham Forest at home, maybe we'll rotate. There have been questions in this that have come about in this last game around whether or not Arteta is using the squad right. There hasn't been much preemptive rotation. It's been mostly, this is the starting 11, quite similar to what we saw last season. This is the starting 11, and in the cups, I'm going to rotate in this way. And so maybe the players like Nketiah, Vieira, players coming off of the bench aren't giving us as much as they can, because they're not getting enough playing time in between. And so this is a big test for Arteta. I do think that I would like to see a little bit more light rotation, like rotating before it's totally obvious. But he seems like the type that's going to play his starting 11 as much as possible. And so we'll see how that works out for us. There's 80 of you guys in here right now, so like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the actual game, and then we can expand a little bit more after that. Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. So the first half was amazing football from Arsenal. I thought that we were popping it around them. They couldn't touch the ball. They had no touches in our box. They couldn't get close to us, and we looked really, really good in that half. Ben White's cross for Xhaka's goal, I thought, was just so good. Two players that are in amazing form connecting for a goal that I just was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." You know what I mean? Loving Ben White right now, also loving Xhaka right now. I think both of them are two of our most informed players. Um, and I thought Odegaard was having a really good half. He created two kind of golden chances for Gabriel Jesus. One of them was the slip ball in behind where Gabriel Jesus looked to be one-on-one on goal. Obviously, like, one of the Southampton players came in and kind of tackled him. But I think a Gabriel Jesus in form puts that in the back of the net. And then he had the little scoop pass where Jesus really just kind of scuffed it. And so I thought Odegaard was having quite a good game. Saka had an interesting half because I thought he was really good, but was unfairly yellow carded for diving. It wasn't a dive. If it wasn't a foul on the Southampton player, it was a coming together. And for them to give Saka a yellow for that, I think was something that maybe he had watched our prior games and had a preconceived notion about some of our players. I think overall, the lack of calls for Gabriel Jesus and the yellow card for Saka came from him thinking and believing that these players, um, you know, fabricate fouls and calls and things like that. That's my feeling on it because I do feel like we play the dark arts. We like, we like a little bit of theatrics. We like those types of things. And I do feel like this referee tried to like tried to go on the opposite side of that and was giving us nothing. But to give Saka a yellow card was so stupid. It really, really was. Like, it just there was no way that he could have seen that as a dive, and, um, yeah, I thought that that was shambolic, but, like, Saka put in a really good cross at the beginning of, that first half that I thought Gabriel probably should have got his head to. I thought he was really bright. I thought Martinelli was really bright. I thought in that first half, we completely dominated them, but I could not get that feeling out, like, of my head that damn, we needed a goal, like a second one. Because we know that we tend to drop a little bit, in the second half. And I wanted the game to be done. I wanted the game to be done. And so I did go into the second half feeling a little bit nervous, but I want to know what you guys are thinking about that first half because I mean, that looked like us. Like that looked like Arsenal. Like we played not that good against Leeds, like, I thought Leeds was worse, but we saw shades of Arsenal in that first half. Are we just a first half team, you know? Like, what is it where we play so good on the front foot in the first half, but we dip in the second? What do you guys think? Let's see. Don One says ref gave Southampton every opportunity to get back into this game. It was an embarrassing spectacle to witness. The Mad Hatter says this ref hates us. Ramsdale bear hugged against Villa. Jesus like 6 times yesterday. Yeah, I do. This is the same referee that didn't give Ramsdale the foul against Aston Villa, and I thought that that was a foul. Most goalkeepers get that, protection, and Ramsdale didn't. He was bear hugged by I think it was like Ollie Watkins or somebody like that, like this, or Jacob Ramsey was one of them, and nothing was given. And in this game, it was like that defender, I don't even know his name, I don't wanna know his name, but he was and this is the thing is when you don't call it initially, it makes that defender feel like they can just get away with it and get away with it and get away with it, and as the half went on, it got worse and worse and worse, and he just felt like, "Okay, well, I can just beat him up." I could just beat him up, and I do feel like some of those were fouls. The one that was in the box, that for me, if that's Harry Kane is a yellow card or is a penalty. It just is. And I don't know why it wasn't on the day, but it felt like the referee had come in with his own baggage. And because he had that baggage, he called the game in a certain way. I've never seen fouls like that against a forward not be given. And so, yeah, it was strange. It really, really was. Um, so this ref is a joke, but again, I do think we did enough in that half to, we didn't do enough where we can't overlook the fact that like we could have done more to make sure the game was out of reach. High Tech J says basically it was match fixing. Ash says tried to headbutt Eddie, then grabbed his throat. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if he plays like that against anybody else that center back. And what happens to him if he does, because I think in any other game, he has a yellow card, a red card, a penalty called against him, or even just a couple of fouls where he doesn't do it anymore. I can't see Gabriel and Saliba getting away with anything like that. It was very strange, and it just felt like he again came in with his own baggage and decided, well, I'm not going to give those, and it was strange. Diallo says that was a pen and a red card. Yo-Yo says we can't rely on the officials. We've known this for decades. We need to move past being victims. Don One says Jesus got punched in the back. Nothing. I did see that. But I mean, he was encouraged by the fact that like the referee thought that he was doing a good job, when it was just normal, so he was encouraged by that. And even like the way Southampton were, acting like he was man of the match and all this type of shit. It's like, whatever. Like, if he does that again against anybody else, like, I would love to see him go to, you know, if he goes and does that against Harry Kane, he's gonna give up a couple penalties. Like, it felt like home cooking. It really did. It was crazy. Amir says, "Same ref that thought Mings didn't wrestle Saka to the ground." Exactly. He came in with his own, um, preconceived notions about who we are and didn't, you know, and didn't call the game the way that I think a lot of people felt like it should have been. Diallo says, "You said it right at first. The ref had preconceived notions about our players." That's how I felt. I feel like he watched film and thought Saka, goes to the ground too easy, and Gabriel Jesus, does a little bit of theatrics. And I do think that they do. Like, that's something that I do think is true, but I still think that you need to call the game as it is. And the the I could forgive some of the other things, but the penalty that should have been given to Gabriel Jesus, that was a clear penalty for me. And then the yellow card against Saka for diving it was ridiculous, so it is what it is. But again, that first half I thought was really, really good from us, but I could not help but feel like, oops, sorry, we needed that second goal because Southampton, they're not a great team, but we just are not able to really play a full 90 at the moment at the same level that we do the first half. And I'm not sure why that is, but we go into the second half and we just look completely different. We look completely different. I do have to say that one thing that really stood out to me was the hard-headedness from Arteta to continue to play Tomiyasu at left back when we know it's not working. And maybe it's working in his head because I think from his standpoint, he's like, I want to play inverted on that side. And if I don't have Zinchenko, I'm going to play Tommy, especially because I'm playing Tierney in the Europa League. But I thought we looked much better once Tierney came on. I think Tierney, although his attributes are not the same as Zinchenko, are so underrated when you're playing against certain types of teams. And Southampton is definitely a P&P type of team. I think at a certain point, they were just kind of running and gunning us, and what I like about Tierney is that he gets into that game, like, he can push it past you and run and get a cross in, and the goal that was, disallowed rightfully, because it went out, I thought that was all because of Tierney just doing simple fullback work, nothing too deep, just getting to the byline and crossing the ball in. And sometimes that works for you. Sometimes it doesn't need to be so complicated. And if it's not Zinchenko, it can't be Tommy because I've seen Tomiyasu play in this position a couple of times. And if it's not a specific role, I do think that we lose something on that side. I don't think his positioning was really good for the goal. I think he struggles when he's getting pressed. When he's not being pressed, he can pass the ball with both feet like like anybody else. But when he's pressed, you can see where he starts to get a little bit nervous. And Southampton started pressing us a little bit more. He started getting a little bit more nervous. And I just don't think there was one point where he was just dribbling and dribbling and dribbling, and instead of just passing the ball, like his indecision caught him. And that encourages a team. It encourages a team. Like, every time you make a mistake, it encourages them more. Their fans get louder. And we've seen that in a couple of games now where we allow the opposition fans to get into the game because we give them easy wins. And Tomiyasu on the left-hand side for me is an easy win for the opposition, like away from home. And so for me, I don't think Tomiyasu has worked on the left. I think we could just go ahead and play Tierney on the left. He's the left back. He can play there. And unless we're playing against a Liverpool or something, or Tottenham, I don't see why we need to do that. I just don't see why we're continuing on with it. I get the winning team stays the same, but sometimes you can change a winning team. It won't kill us, So yeah, I think that Tomiyasu struggled quite a bit in the second half, and I think most of our players did. I thought everybody just fell off of a mental cliff. It was like we couldn't figure out how to do simple things. Saliba, I don't even know if this is in the first half or not, but he passed the ball straight to a Southampton player. And again, those are easy wins. That's how the fans get up for it and stuff like that. And you could just see that we were getting a little bit rattled. We were a little bit sloppy. And I want to know what you guys think about this is that even though our plan A has gotten a lot better, plan A has went from 70-80% to 90%, because we've added better players and we've gotten better as a team. But we have no plan B at all. We really don't have a plan B at all. And it worries me because it's not even about plan B, like somebody coming off of the bench. It's plan B in terms of how we're going to get out of these difficult situations. When we played against Manchester United away from home, what I thought that we did quite well was when we got into difficult circumstances and we couldn't pass the ball at the back, we just hoofed it long, and Martinelli and Saka and Jesus just ran them down and tried to create things in that way. I'm not seeing enough of that. I'm not seeing enough of that. I'm not seeing enough of that problem solving when we get into situations where teams are feeling good against us and they feel like, you know, they're going to press us when we're trying to pass out of the back. Why don't we hoof it long and just press their fullbacks and their center backs? Why don't we do that anymore? I don't see that enough of that. And for me, that's a good plan B when you're under pressure, because if you have Martinelli barreling down on you or Gabriel Jesus, you're going to make a mistake and then you can get second balls playing that way. But even when Gabriel Jesus was doing a good job, you know, he wasn't winning the ball per se, but he was battling with the center backs. A lot of those second balls went straight to Southampton players. Our players were nowhere near it. And so even if it's not about having players coming off of the bench to create a plan B, why don't we have a plan B when the game state changes? We're always trying to ticky taka it in and out of pressure. And I just found myself being a little bit frustrated seeing shades of the Leeds game where Odegaard and Partey and White and everybody that was just over there trying to ticky taka it out of that situation, hoof it long, but not stupidly, not hoof it just straight to them, but have your forwards run onto them and can we not pass it in? Can we not kick it in behind their fullbacks and run onto it? Why don't we have anything else? You know? And so if we're gonna hoof it long, like Michael's saying, like, oh, we did it, hit it long to Jesus in the second half. You need to go get the second balls. And that's where, the likes of Odegaard and Xhaka need to do a better job, and so plan B needs to be worked on a little bit more. It really does, because teams are going to start to say, okay, well, if we press them, we can hurt them. And they can, but we should be able to hurt them in a different way. I'm just not seeing enough of that. And I did see that early on in the season. Um, Lynn says, although I love Jesus, he thinks because he's the main man, he needs to take the whole game on his shoulders. And for me, he needs to know when to be further up the field and let others take responsibility. I agree. I think he does that panicky thing where it's like, okay, now that I'm not scoring enough goals, I need to come deeper and do more. No, we need you to stay in the box more. That's what we need. And so I do think that Jesus is having a little bit of that lack of confidence moment. But again, we have the best possible game for him to rebound against, which is Nottingham Forest at home. And, I would play him and try to get him a couple of goals in that game because we could reset him then. But you never really know with a player. I do think his form is it may have something. I don't know. This is kind of who I know him to be. And so other players also need to step up in this circumstance. So we'll see what happens with that. But I do agree he needs to stay up and not panic and try to do too much. I do find myself saying, do less. Do you know what I mean? Um, in these last couple of games. The Mad Hatter says Martinelli had moments of brilliance, but he looked tired. I haven't rewatched the game, so I'm not sure if I remember feeling like he looked tired. I just think I know the game fell apart in every way, shape, and form once Nketiah and Vieira came on. So would I have rather had a tired Martinelli, and Odegaard, or those two? I know who I would choose. Ash I says Martinelli didn't do anything, to be honest. Odegaard was the mistake. Yo-Yo says the issue isn't Gabriel Jesus. The issue is Nketiah as a second choice and has played mostly off the bench. The squad is showing its limits. Let's see. Christopher said, "It's been amazing run so far given the schedule." It has been, and that's the that's the overarching thing, is that, like, it's not really panic mode, but I think it's okay for us to talk about things that are not going 100% right, even if we know that overall we're doing okay. Um, Data official says, "Tired performance, we sacrificed the match for Europa qualification." Um, Potentially, but we still are top of the league. We're still in a good position. If we beat Nottingham Forest at home, I still think we're Gucci, so I don't think this game is like, "Oh my gosh, we shouldn't have sacrificed for Europa League qualification," because we do need to come first in that group. We do need to make sure that we don't have to play extra games and have to play against one of the teams that come down from the Champions League too early. So I do think that it's hard to manage it, and we've dropped points, but if you notice, everybody that played midweek dropped points. I think we're seeing the limitations of more than just our squad. We're seeing teams are tired, finding it difficult to rotate and find their feet, and we're no different than that. Ash I says, "Eddie and Fabio put in the worst cameos I've ever seen." Yeah, it wasn't good, it wasn't good, and I think this is where the conversation around, are we not rotating enough? Because when we saw with Eddie Nketiah when he first came into the squad last season, he was kind of poor when he first started out. Did he play against Brighton? I know he played against Southampton when we lost. And then when we played against like Chelsea and United, he did a lot better. We played against Leeds, he played well. Um, and once he got a run of games, he started playing better. So if Eddie Nketiah is the type of player that needs minutes to kind of keep himself fresh, then Arteta needs to find a way to use him a little bit more often. And so there are times where I do feel like we can drop a Vieira in the team and let Odegaard sit out. I do feel like there's times where we could, put Nketiah you know, in games at home when we're kind of like in a good position, and because we have the majority of the rest of the team and we're playing at a good level, we won't feel the drop off. As much, but Arteta plays his starting 11 every single game, no matter what, rain or shine, unless he has an injury, and so these players don't play enough in the Premier League, and then you put them into situations where we're not playing well in the second half, and then they just kind of flub it, and so I do think they need to do better. I do feel like I find myself feeling really frustrated with the likes of Sambi and Nketiah and Vieira sometimes when they come in, because I'm just like, "Don't you wanna start? Don't you wanna push for a place?" But I also think that when you don't get enough minutes, you don't have that, you're not in that continuity, you're not in that groove. And so when you start and stop, it takes you a minute to get up to speed. And so it's I do think that their cameos were really terrible, and didn't add anything. But I still feel like maybe that has a little bit to do with the squad rotation, which again doesn't mean I want Arteta out or anything like that. I just think that he could do some preemptive rotation just to keep people fresh. Um, Football Power Hour says, "Yeah, Jesus should be able to walk through the Forest defense and will probably score more." Um, he just needs a goal. Most strikers just need a goal to get themselves going. David says, "Fabio Vieira yesterday was a completely unnecessary sub. Seriously, that game was not of his level." I think it was the timing of the sub and, like, when he came in, and, Odegaard, I thought by all accounts was having a good game, and so I didn't really understand. It's like, if you wanna get Fabio Vieira out there, then you need to take off a defender and play with 3 at the back and push to win the game, and I thought that's where Arteta made the mistake. I think if Arteta really wanted to push to win the game and wanted to get Vieira out there to get more attackers on there, you take, I don't know. I don't know, you take somebody out, like, maybe you take, maybe you don't bring on Tierney and you just play Tomiyasu, Saliba, and Gabriel at the back, and you play Saka and, I don't know, somebody else, like wing backs or something, and then you try to, or you maybe play Vieira as a wing back, I don't know, and you try to put more attackers on. That makes more sense than taking out Odegaard. I didn't think Odegaard coming off made any sense, because it's like Vieira's not gonna do anything better than Odegaard in that circumstance where we need control over the match. And so, yeah, I thought that that was a weird sub. I did, and I thought we lost everything. And Vieira was getting kind of pushed around and stuff like that. But you know, I also think the reaction to Vieira has been a little bit over the top. I think we want to throw players away so quickly, and it wasn't so long ago where Vieira was man of the match against Bodo Glimt at home, and he played so well against Brentford and stuff, and that was away from home against a physical team. I just think it was the period in the game that made it strange that Fabio Vieira came in at that time, especially if you weren't going to keep Odegaard on. We needed Odegaard and Vieira, not one or the other. Um, Matt G says we need to accept that Eddie isn't that impact striker. He plays his best football when he gets a run of games. I agree. But if that's the case, then we've made a mistake, because if you're only gonna play your starting striker mostly and you're not gonna preemptively rotate, then there's no point in having Eddie Nketiah here. If you know that he's not an impact striker and he needs games to get into form. Don One says Odegaard should have stayed on. I agree. Let's see. Marshmallow says we need someone better than Jesus. I think we're throwing Jesus in the bin really early. I think a lot of this is confirmation bias of people that didn't really want him in the first place, but they're forgetting that he has 5 goals and 4 assists. And if he had not played the way that he played, we would not be where we are. And so I don't disagree that maybe in the future we'll need somebody else or, whatever like that. But I think we're too quick to turn our back on players, too quick. And it does seep over to the players. They do look at social media and stuff like that. And I think if anything, Jesus needs support rather than criticism. Like, I mean, not you can critique him, but like, we need to get rid of him. That kind of stuff is just like nonsense to me. Nocturnal Gunner says Mikel can be a bit stubborn. He's got to look at the fixtures and see where he can rotate and just ask, am I okay with dropping points to rest some players? Yeah, I mean, I do think that he can be quite stubborn, but we're seeing what kind of manager he is. He is going to play that starting 11 regardless. And so this is 2 seasons in a row where we're seeing this pattern from Mikel. We thought it was just because, we didn't have Europa League, so he was doing it. He's doing it again, and so we supposedly had the stronger bench, and now we're still playing the same 11. So it could also be that he doesn't trust the players just yet. He doesn't trust Eddie, he doesn't trust Sambi, he doesn't trust Vieira yet, and he trusts that 11, but we'll see if it costs him or not. If we go into the World Cup top of the league, I don't think you can, and we got through our Europa group stage top of the group. I don't think really you could be upset about what he's done. I think things have kind of just evened out a little bit. I think we were due a draw or due a dropping of points, and we dropped it here. If we beat Nottingham Forest, and do well against Chelsea, I don't think we'll be thinking much about this. Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. The Matt Hatter says Jesus is perfect for us. What the F are you talking about? I don't know if you're talking about me or what, but like, maybe not. Michael says summing off Odegaard right after he scored the disallowed goal was a weird one still. It was like, and I thought when that goal went in, I was like, see, you guys, we can score another goal. You just need to keep pressing. And we needed another attacker on, maybe not taking off the one that was doing the most. It was strange. I'm not sure why he did it, to be honest. Amira says, was having a good game yesterday, actually did his primary job and created a few big chances. Fans want Vieira to start so badly because he's the new shiny toy, but you saw what we lost without O. Don One says, Odegaard still had control. It was a bad sub. It just was kind of like, what are you thinking here? Like, what's going on? What's happening? Don One says, Jess, do we need to look at Tommy? We have lost our dominance in midfield without Zinni. Good point. I think Zinchenko, we played without him since the last game that he played, y'all. He played, was it Tottenham? When was the last time he played? Let me look. When was the last time Zinchenko played? Who played? When was the last time Zinchenko played? It's been so long. I'm like, "Does this man exist?" Um, I don't want him to become a Tommy, because remember Tommy, I'm just gonna look at it really quick. You guys will probably let me know in the chat, when's the last time that Zinchenko played? Was it Tottenham? Sorry, you guys, I'm looking, and it's taking me a long time because my button is too tight. Yep, Tottenham. So the last time he played was against Tottenham, and so that was the 1st of October, and now we're at the end of the month. And so yeah, he's missed a month, but he also missed games prior to that. Um, the thing about Zinchenko is that, I mean, I think we are missing him in terms of the way that we want to play with that left back. And so Tomiyasu is not really doing the same job because he can do it when we're not being pressed, but not as good. I mean, Zinchenko literally is an attacking midfielder playing left back. And so I think we are managing Zinchenko and trying to make sure that he doesn't get re injured because we're going to need him in the second half of the season. But you play without key players for a long time and you start to feel the weight of them not being there. And so yeah, the Tomiyasu thing did work against Liverpool, but it hasn't worked since then, and we've lost a little bit of something on that left-hand side, a little bit of connectivity. I thought Zinchenko, Xhaka, Martinelli was so good. Um, it was really, really good. At the beginning of the season, we kind of lost that a little bit, but that's the name of the game. I think that we have to get used to the idea that we're not gonna have our best 11 every single game, and we're just gonna have to deal with it. I think most teams don't play with their best 11 every single game, and so I think we've done a really good job to manage that. I remember a time where if one person was out, that was it. If one person was out, that was it. We've played without Thomas Partey. We kind of survived that as well. I think the key is getting into the January transfer window and making sure we reinforce the squad with players that can actually contribute to the end of the season. The last thing we need to do in January is to buy for the future. We need to buy for now, and that's a conversation that's definitely coming up in group chats. It's coming up on Twitter, and it's already kind of been confirmed that we're gonna go into the January transfer window, like, and try to reinforce the squad. It has to happen 100% because we don't know what's gonna happen in the World Cup. We don't know who we're gonna lose, how they're gonna be coming back, how many minutes they're gonna play, and so making sure that I think it's even important for top four, to be honest. I think other teams may get better. If we get worse, what's that gonna do? And so yeah, we'll need maybe 1 or 2 players in January to continue on, but yeah, I think we've done really well considering the players that we haven't had available and keeping the players that we need fit. The likes of Jesus and Martinelli and Saka, Odegaard, we've done pretty well to keep them fit, and get us through this first third of the season. And so, I think we've done well, but they do need to invest in the summer or in January to make sure that we can continue this form as the minutes kind of get more and more and more. Um, Yo-Yo says, please try and offload Sambi if we're not going to use him, retain some of his value. The interesting thing about Sambi is that I just find the desperation for some players to want to talk about what they're going through a little bit too much for me. Like, eh, I think he's another player that needs to be relied upon game in and game out to be able to see the best of him. And so there's players that can come in off the bench and do a really good job, and then there's players that need to be starters. And I think Sambi is displaying some of those traits of somebody that needs to be playing all the time. I mean, some of the things that he said about Martinez and the Belgian squad situation, I'm like, he feels like he should be in that team. Like, he feels like he's up there. And there's nothing wrong with backing yourself and feeling like you're really, really good. But I do think that when you get the minutes that you get, you have to make an impact. And it's just not enough to just do what's required. And so I think from an Arsenal perspective, he kind of just does what we expect him to do, but he doesn't do anything special to make us think, what should we play Sambi? What maybe if we could play him at the 8, what would happen? And so He's just kind of, in that spot where I think he wants to play more minutes, and he's probably not gonna get them when Elneny comes back. He will definitely be ahead of him in the pecking order for that number 6 position. As a number 8, I'm not sure where he ranks in terms of everybody else, and so, yeah, he's, for me, somebody that I think he needs a loan. What he's saying, how he's performing, all says that maybe I need a loan so we can get the most out of him. Um, or so he can get the most out of his time and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Sambi is somebody that I wouldn't mind seeing being loaned out in January if we bring in another midfielder. Um, let's see. Lynn says, I also feel that is what Mikel is doing with KT, as he cannot afford for him to be injured again. You could see yesterday he was taken out and he was in pain with his knee. Yeah, I mean, I understand it. I do, that maybe we're trying to manage some of these minutes and make sure that we have players for the back end of the season. That's really important. But I don't understand continuing to play Tommy in that position unless he's doing exactly what Arteta wants him to do, and we're just not seeing it. But it doesn't feel like it's working, but maybe it's working for Arteta. I'm not sure. Saksham says, Jess, do you think we need a goal scoring central winger like Gakpo or more of a wide winger? I think we need a versatile forward that has goals. I don't care if they play left, right, whatever. I think we need a player similar to the players that we have now, that can kind of play on either side, can kind of go central or not, whatever, but then also have some goals in them. I think that's kind of what we need. Eddie is not really that. Like, he nominally can play on the left, but really doesn't have the ability 1v1 to do what Martinelli does, on that side. He is a striker. And so if we could bring in somebody that can play wide, but can also play central, but mostly is somebody that can replicate what Saka and Martinelli does out wide and also score goals, that's kind of what I would want to see from a player coming in. I just don't know who that player is. Um, Ahaha says Mudryk been doing pretty well this season, in the Champions League. My only issue with Mudryk is that I find him to be the type of player that would play well on the counter, and I don't think we play on the counter that much. I think we need a player that can still play our way. And when I watch him play, I don't see somebody that I would trust in possession. Would I trust him where with a lot of green grass in front of him? Absolutely, because that's where he kind of looks really good. But we don't tend to have a lot of green grass in front of us. We tend to be playing in one half and we need somebody that can play in small spaces. I'm not saying that he can't do that. I'm just saying I haven't seen it. And so for 50 million, you want somebody that can play your style. And I'm not sure that that's Madrid, but he looks a very exciting player. And yeah, I wouldn't, like, cry if we got him. I just would be concerned a little bit about, like, but on a normal basis, can he play, our way? Yo-Yo says we need a forward who can play ISO ball. I agree. We don't really have a 1v1 merchant in our team, and that's probably why we looked at Rafinha. Um, Saksham says Pedro Neto suits us like a glove. It's a shame that he's gotten injured again, but I do see the pattern there in Rafinha and Pedro Neto. They could kind of play on both sides, but they both had that 1v1 skill about them. And so I can see why we looked at them. Diallo says we need to go for Jasper Lindstrom. I really like the player a lot. When he was he at Bodo Glimt? I forget where he was at, but he was younger, obviously, and he wasn't at Frankfurt yet. I really liked him. I thought he looked like an Arsenal player. The only thing is that his end product is not quite there yet. So I'm not sure if that's the player that you want to bring in January. But as a general rule, I think that's the type of player that fits in with what Arsenal are trying to do. Amira says fans who want Sambi sold already should learn from the Xhaka situation. Finally played in his position and now he's thriving. Sambi definitely has been affected by El Nenny's injury, needs a chance at left 8. Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I hear that. And I don't necessarily want him sold. I just want him to potentially go out on a loan because if he's not going to get the playing time, because even if he wants to play left eight, he's not going to get a lot of playing time because Xhaka plays every minute. So the best thing would be for him to potentially go on a loan. But I'm not saying it's a curtain call for Sambi in terms of being an Arsenal player. I don't like that he's talking a lot. I find that to be a little bit like, okay, why? But yeah, maybe that's his real position as an 8. But I guess my question to you would be, do you see him developing into the type of 8 that Granit Xhaka is now? Somebody that gets into the box, finishes off moves, can also drop deep into the 2 with Thomas Partey, has the passing range, but also has, the ability to get into the attack. I'm not sure that I see Sambi as a final third player yet, but like Xhaka, he might be able to unlock that at some point. So I hear what you're saying. Victor says, Jess, TAA, and RJ to Arsenal by January. How do you feel about that? I feel like that would be unnecessary because we don't need that many right backs, and also unlikely. But yeah. Dare to dream. A cow says Sambi's problem is off the ball. He can't tackle. The Mad Hatter says I'm getting tired of Sambi. He doesn't go into tackles. Yeah, I mean, he's not a defensive player and he has no defensive awareness. So that hurts him. But Odegaard and Vieira and these guys aren't necessarily too defensive either. So I think it's just a matter of does he have enough going in the final third to make it okay for him not to have that defensive awareness. I think we compensate and are okay with players having not being as well rounded if what they give in terms of like what they're really good at is really, useful, then we tend to be okay with it. They score goals, they get assists, they control games, things like that. But if he's not contributing in the final third, but he's also somebody that doesn't really do well defensively, I'm trying to figure out what is his super skill that we're going to be okay with him not doing those things for. Um I'm looking at Sambi. I'm trying to figure out what Sambi is going to be. And this is the other player that's going to be coming into the fold is Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe is a player that I feel like Xhaka's position suits quite well. Um whether it's, in the future, I mean, because it's a little early days for this, but ESR, Vieira, Odegaard, ESR, Vieira, Odegaard, like these players can chop and change in those 8 positions and they have that final third quality that you need. And I think ESR being there definitely shuts the door a little bit more on Sambi as an 8. You know, um, we need somebody that can play we need somebody that can play Thomas Partey's position. That's really what we need, right? Um, Yo-Yo says Sambi was meant to replace Mateo for me, and I'm waiting to see it. Diallo says, Jess, we went in for Douglas Luiz for a reason. Arteta wasn't planning to use Sambi as a 6. We sure yeah, no, I agree. Like I totally understand what you guys are saying by that. I don't think that they wanted to play him in the 6, but even when we start talking about him as an 8, I'm struggling to see him as the type of 8 that can do what Xhaka is doing now, and maybe that's not what they want from him. Maybe they want him to be more of like a Naby Keita type or something like that. But, I just wonder, does he have end product? Does he have goals? Does he have assists? Or is he just a neat and tidy passer? Because we need more than that. So yeah, we do miss ESR. I think he would have been a good sub to bring on in the Southampton game. He's the type of player that you could have brought in for Martinelli and we could have made something happen with that. We are missing him quite a bit. But after, the World Cup, having him come back into the team and hopefully having some reinforcements from the window will really help us out. But in terms of this game, I just think if you rebound against, you go away from home to PSV, you beat them there, come top of the group, you go up against Nottingham Forest at home and just absolutely rinse them. You forget all about this and you stay top of the league. And then we're not really thinking about this. I think Arsenal have gotten to a point now where, which is kind of good, that those bad performances are not really resulting in losses and consecutive losses. Because last season, like, Leeds would have been a loss, and then we would have lost midweek, and then we would have lost against Southampton. Now it's kind of like a win, and a draw. So we are improving, but we also want to make sure that we nip it in the bud, and whatever is happening in the second half of games, they fix it, and there's no better time to fix it than against Nottingham Forest at home. And I think some of this is also that we played a lot of away games, and we do kind of feed off of our crowd and all that kind of stuff. So being back at the Emirates will really help. But I'm not tripping. I like that we actually are able to talk about these things, and like it's fine, and it's not like the end of the world. But I'm sure they're having conversations behind the scenes around why these things are happening. I think it's totally okay for fans to speak about it as well. Yo-Yo says 9 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss is brilliant. I agree. Let's see. Amira had a question earlier as well around KT and Zinni's availability. If you guys have some questions, let me know. You guys can just put it in the chat and I'll answer them. We can go on for about like 15 more minutes or so. KT and Zinni's availability combined is basically having one starting left back. Do you think Tommy's the unofficial left back rotation, unless they're both fit? We still have Cedric at right back if Ben needs rest. Yeah, I think Tomiyasu is. I think Arteta prefers Tomiyasu over Tierney in that position because he can play with both feet and he's more a center back midfielder than a traditional left back. I think that's why Tierney is kind of being sequestered to the Europa League minutes, because he's a typical left back, and playing inverted is something that he can do, but it doesn't bring out the best in him. And so I think Arteta likes having that midfield center back vibe going on in the back line. So I think Tomiyasu at this point does kind of come in front of Tierney in the pecking order, which if that's the if that's the case, yeah. There's questions around KT and whether or not, he's somebody that will be here for the long haul. Because if I can't get in the team in front of a right back, then I'm like, where can I go? And that's not, I don't want to get rid of Tierney. But if I was Tierney, I'd be thinking about that. I would. Um, Matt G says, Jess, you can buy one realistic player in January. Who do you buy? Who do I buy? Realistic. One. Oh man. If I have to look at somebody realistic, I'm looking at somebody who's probably on the exterior, on the outskirts of their squad, somebody who can play our style. Probably not the best option, but can do something. And I would say, I'd want somebody that I know can play in the Premier League. So I don't know. I'd maybe chuck that 30 million over at Barcelona and see if they give us Ferran Torres. Because yeah, you guys know I love a rehabilitation job for some players. There's some players that I think are talented, but in the wrong scenario. Like, I think the same thing about Frankie de Jong. I thought the same thing about Gabriel Jesus. I think the same thing about Ferran Torres. And the key to what you're saying is one realistic player. So realistic means somebody that's probably not being counted on in their team at the moment. And so that's what makes it really difficult. So it probably won't be a Vlahovic, it won't be an Osimhen, it won't be these types of players. So if you look at it, it has to be somebody that can fit into your squad, and you're not going to be like looking at it like, why do we bring you in for 6 months? And so I would say somebody like that, because they can play across the front three. I know they played in the Premier League, and if they're in the right system, in the right scenario, they probably can score some goals for us. We wouldn't lose much from it. And I also know that Arteta's managed him before. He knows about the player, and I'm sure that's why we went for him at the end of the transfer window this summer. Doesn't solve all of our problems. Would it be like, a marquee signing? But we're talking about January, and we're talking about realistic. And most of the time in January, you're going after players that are on the fringes of their team, and so that's probably what I would think. Felix, is that realistic in January? I'm not sure. But I know like there's rumors of him wanting out. He's somebody else that I think would fit in with what we're trying to do quite well too. Is he like a killer up top? Is he like what is his goal scoring record like? But yeah, I think he would be good, but he would also cost really more a lot more. Um, let's see. Yo-Yo says Fran Torres left Cite for Barcelona. Why would he join the Ars? I assumed he was homesick. Well, it just depends. I think if you're not getting playing time, that could be a difference. And the only reason why we didn't get him was because Xavi wanted to keep him. And so we don't know what's really going on with players. We assume a lot, but we don't know much. And so I would just say when I'm saying realistic, I'm saying somebody that we can actually get because they're probably not being counted on. Again, that's the key here. So I'm not going to sit and say Ivan Toney. You're not getting Ivan Toney from Brentford in January. You're just not. And so there's not a lot of players that are killers and are marquee signings that are just sitting around for the January transfer window. Remember, even like Tottenham, they went to Juventus and got Kulusevski and Bentancur in January. Neither of those players anybody thought were any good. They were labeled flops at Juventus, and they came in, and I think that they were the difference between us getting top four and them getting top four. So, I think those things matter. My gamer says, I don't want Tony. Let's see. Aha says Chelsea got Fernando Torres in January. Liverpool got Virgil van Dijk in January. That's true, but those are like the exception, not the rule. We got Aubameyang in January, but you know, that was because he was being kicked out of the club basically. So I get what you're saying, but that's not really the usual scenario. But we'll see. Maybe some teams will be, open to selling key players in January. I just haven't really seen it that way. So yeah, we'll see. We will see. Let's see. Mamang says I can see Torres in January. Saksham says Felix is more clinical than Jesus for sure. Don One says Felix is no killer, but I would take him. We just need to make sure that if Martinelli, Jesus, or Saka got injured, there was somebody else there that could play our way. We wouldn't, we could still count on them for some goals. And I think either of those players would fit that bill, in terms of bringing in, like, a target striker type of guy. I just don't know. I maybe because I haven't been watching, but I just don't know of anybody that we could go out and get in January that's not important to their team. Yo-Yo says Forest, home, Chelsea, away, Wolves away, remaining in the Prem. Best case and worst case predictions. So, best case is that we beat Forest, we probably draw to Chelsea and we beat Wolves, but I can also see us beating Forest, losing to Chelsea, and beating Wolves. I just don't see us losing to Wolves even away from home. They're terrible right now. And I think we'll beat Forest, but Chelsea is a tricky one away from home. Watching them against Man United, I don't think they're as close to the finished article as maybe they thought because playing in Europe, they were doing quite well. Against Man United, they were terrible. But against us, they tend to always play kind of down to us. I think Chelsea don't respect us, and so when they play against us, they kind of let their guard down, and that's why over the last couple of seasons, we've been pretty good against them. But I don't know what that will be like with Potter, so I think Chelsea is a difficult one to call, but I would say we need to try to leave there with something. I think that's so important. Leave there with something because I think it's going to be tight. And if we can get something away from home at our top six rivals, that could be so good for us come the end of the season. But I see us beating Forest no matter what. Um, Chelsea, I'll say a draw for now and beating Wolves because they're really bad and they don't score goals. If we let them score, I'd be devastated. Let's see. O'Malley says Potter has had Arteta's number the last few years. Yeah, he has, but I don't really look at it like that because what I saw from them against Man United was that it may be Potter, but it ain't Brighton. and so they're a little bit away from that. He has a mismatched team with quite a few injuries. They obviously have a drop off in quality when they don't have Reece James, who's a big, big part of their team. And so I'm not quite seeing Potter ball there yet. And so I do still think that even though Potter does well against Arteta, he doesn't have his Brighton team playing that Brighton football. And so I still think we'll get a draw at the very least. Aha says Saliba and Jesus on 4 yellows. If they get it versus Forest, they can play versus Chelsea. They can't play versus Chelsea. That's a really good point. I was kind of hoping they would get it in the last game, to make sure that they could just be out against Nottingham Forest. But that's not how the game works. And so hopefully neither of them do it. I mean, shouldn't we be able to go against Nottingham Forest without Saliba? I think we should, so maybe Saliba is somebody that you'd sit out that game, to make sure that he's available for Chelsea. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. O'Malley says thoughts on Newcastle. My thoughts on Newcastle is that they're here and they haven't even really dug into their pocket yet. Eddie Howe is doing an insane job there. Their underlying metrics say that they're like the third best team in the league, and they've been that since Eddie Howe has been there. And so it's a long enough time now where I think we can say that it's not a fluke and it's really what they're doing. And they're not playing with Isak, and they're not playing with they bought somebody else that's oh no, they don't have Saint Maximum either. He's been injured quite a bit. We know Callum Wilson has been injured. Even Bruno Guimaraes has been injured. So even with a rotating group of players, they have done well. And what I've been really impressed by is what he's been able to get out of the players that have already been there. So the likes of Shar and Willock that was already there. And there's quite a few players that I just feel like Almiron. These players were kind of like nobody rated them, and now they look so different. And I think that's I've always rated Eddie Howe. I've always thought he did a really good job. His Bournemouth was a good Bournemouth. And so I think he's doing such a good job, and they haven't done anything yet. So if they mess around and get into the top 4, which I don't think they will, that would be insane. But even getting Europe, I think opens them up to being able to recruit the likes of Madison, Tielemans, players like that, players that aren't going to get into the top 4 teams but could go to Newcastle and get paid. I forget who said it, but I thought it was yeah, probably a good point is like somebody like Zaha would do really well at Newcastle. Somebody that could clearly play for like a top 6 team but won't get a move because of this and that and the third. Him and Saint Maximum with Isak, like that would be insane. There's just so many things that they could do, and it just shows what coaching can do for you. And I like that they go away from home with no fear. Um, they played against Liverpool and I think also Man City away from home already. I could be mistaken, but they played with no fear. They went away to Tottenham, no fear. Away to Manchester United, no fear. So they're a team that's serious and they're here already, and it just is what it is, and we just have to get used to it. Michael says a front line of Zaha, Isak, and Saint Maximum is a scary thought. Yeah. Uh, Clucking Bell says Joe Linton leaving Ben Shite for dead on May. Oh, we laughed. Sure. Akau says you want an oldie Abba. We don't want him. We're the third largest club in the UK. 13 titles, 12 FA Cups. You can call yourself European Giants because of your 2 CL Cups after spending 2.5 billion, but we are bigger. Talking to a Chelsea fan, I think. Diallo says Zaha and St. Maximum can't play in the same team, no chance. You never know. But I would look at him, and I think they did look at him. They looked at him when they were also looking at Jack Harrison. They looked at Zaha, so don't be surprised. And when I look at their team, they don't have very many passers. They have a lot of really good ball progressors, very physical, power and pace type of players in midfield. Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, good passer, but also has power and pace as well. Willock plays in there. So they have players that can run and gun and do all that kind of stuff, but they don't have somebody that can unpick locks. And so that's where somebody like Madison would come in really well for them. So yeah, they're here. What can we do? Yeah, we have 14 FA Cups. Aha says Eze in January maybe. We do need a winger. Eze right now is like playing left 8 for Crystal Palace, and I think he's doing a really good job there. But nevertheless, I do think that Crystal Palace players at the moment are a little bit difficult to gauge whether or not we'd be able to get them because they're starting for Patrick, and I'm not sure they would leave to sit on our bench per se. Is I don't see any of their players coming to Arsenal and starting, So Eze is a difficult one. He was in our academy, which is weird. But Eze, great player, but I would rather just wait on ESR, to be honest. If we're gonna go for Eze, why not just wait on ESR? Because I think they do quite similar things. They can both play left 8, but also play wing. Um, so I would just wait on ESR instead of going in for Eze in January, to be honest. Let's see. JJ says, we have played 7 games in October, drawing 1. I think this is really good. No need to panic. I agree. Let's see what you guys are saying. CPA's perspective says Newcastle may pull a Leicester. I don't think they'll win the league, if that's what you're saying. But I hear what you're saying. They are good. C. Wilder says he's here getting a dose of attention, his favorite thing ever. I'm sure you guys are talking about Clucking Bell. Lionide says, don't block Turkey Cluck entertainment value. Aha says, Jess, would you make 11 changes for Thursday? No, I wouldn't. But another away game that we need to get a result at. I mean, let me say this. I wouldn't start Jesus. I wouldn't start Martinelli. I wouldn't start Thomas Partey. And I wouldn't start Saliba. Yeah. So I would go with Turner, Tommy, Holding, Gabriel, Tierney, Sambi, Xhaka, Odegaard, Eddie, Saka, and Nelson. That's what I'd go with. Some kind of mixture of starters and non-starters, but yeah, I think we are going to have to play some of our better players to just make sure we come top of the group. And then against Nottingham Forest, we should be able to do something against them without our number ones as well, so yeah. But yeah, I need to see Eddie do something. He needs to be able to allow Gabriel Jesus not to have to play every single game. So I do think that having Eddie there, but also making sure you have Odegaard to create the chances would be a good balance for that. And then I might even start Vieira at home against Nottingham Forest, so that Odegaard could be fresh for Chelsea, because I think at home Vieira could do fine against Nottingham Forest. They're not a really physical team. So yeah, I mean, it's just about getting the balance right, but it's all about finishing chances as well. You finish your chances early, put the game away, and then you can still rotate a little bit more. Amir says, our fans who are overreacting about yesterday's result, doing it just because their expectations have changed. Our results aren't bad at all for a top 4 team, but maybe not for the title. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I do think that some people's expectations have changed. I see a lot of, oh, well, you can't be drawing away from home to Southampton if you're in a title race. So I do think some people are really buying into the title race thingy. I think we can. I think we can win the league, but it's a small percentage, if that makes sense. So, there's some teams that have like no chance whatsoever. I think we do have a chance, but it's not that big of one. But I think it's important for us to almost pretend in a way that we are fighting for the title because you want to set those expectations and push, but also have flexibility to have be realistic as well. And so if you feel like losing or drawing the game against Southampton is not good enough to win the title. Fair enough, and you're upset about that. But also remember that we're not really supposed to be in a title race, so you can also be relaxed as well. We're in a good position, you know. I think that's the weird thing is that we're starting to mount too much pressure on us in some ways as well, like because we feel like we're in a title race. We're not even supposed to be here. Relax. Like, you know, you can be annoyed at a performance but not take it that serious, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a hard balance to have. It's a difficult balance to have because you want to believe that you're in a title race, so you want to push for those types of standards, but you also have to remember that we're not supposed to be there so you can relax. You know, we don't have to be like, oh my God, every single time we drop a point. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Diallo, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, just do you think Don Conte will last the season? I do think he'll last the season, but I think he'll really, depending on where they finish, he might think about doing something different. It depends because if they don't win a trophy now, I'm not sure that I see Harry Kane staying if Bayern Munich really becomes serious about wanting to bring him in. You never even know. Like, if let's say that Manchester United somehow get into the top four, they may consider coming after Harry Kane. You know, so if they lose Harry Kane, I do see him leaving. I think if they finish outside the top 4, I think he'll leave. Um, I don't think that this is a long-term thing for Conte. So I do see him finishing out the season, but depending on where they finish, I don't think that he'll stay. Um, Rajat says, "Do you think Newcastle will take your spot in the top 4?" Um, no. I think the people that need to be more worried about that are probably Chelsea, Man United, and Liverpool because they're the teams that are kind of in and around that last spot, and Newcastle hop, skipped, and jumped over them. So I'm not that worried about Newcastle in terms of our top 4 right now because we're doing really well. I think that's more for the teams that have not really shown top 4 consistency this season so far. Um, in terms of, like, long term, they'll eventually end up being a Man City anyway, and we'll probably feel and think of them in the exact same way where they're inevitable because they're money and, you know, it is what it is, but they'll also be, like, an additional spot in the Champions League. There'll be 5 spots instead of 4, you know, so that might alleviate that, like, "Oh my god, we're not making the top 4," whatever, because 'cause there'll be 5 spots, but in terms of this season, being worried about it, I think that's more for the teams that haven't I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but, like, we're performing at a top 4 level, if not a title challenge level. So, we have nothing to worry about right now. Um, Fabrizio Zal says, "If Harry Kane leaves Tottenham, we'll sign Mueller and Ronaldo confirmed." Fair enough. That's funny. Alright, you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here now. I really enjoyed this. My bun is so tight, like, I cannot wait to take it out because it's like, you know? But I enjoyed this. I always enjoy talking to you guys. Thank you guys for always being here, showing up, supporting the channel, all that kind of stuff. Big things on the horizon. I can't really talk about it just like right now, but a huge announcement. I can't wait to tell you guys. I really can't wait. Like, but big things coming up in the next month or so. And yeah, really enjoyed this and I can't wait to talk to you guys on the next one. Um, look out for something on Wednesday and we'll talk then. Bye, y'all.